Drake has always defined his value and identity in the rap game by the numbers, chart toppers, record-breaking streams, and massive first-week sales. Even as his latest project SSS for You underperformed, selling barely half of what his recent albums did in their debut weeks, it still managed to become his 14th #1 album overall. That gave Drake a momentary win, a title he could still wave around, at least on the surface. But as the weeks passed, reality hit hard. Just 3 weeks after release, SSS for You fell far from the top. It wasn't holding steady like his previous projects used to when he was still widely respected. In fact, the album performed so poorly that in 1 week it didn't even move 1,000 copies. Yes, we're in the streaming era, but that's not an excuse when Kendrick Lamar's GNX is still pulling thousands of sales weekly. To make matters worse for Drake, SSS for You didn't just lose its grip on the top of the charts to a fresh release. It was dethroned by Kendrick Lamar's GNX in week 15. That's a staggering blow. Kendrick's months-old album overtook Drake's new one, sealing the perception of SSS for You as one of Drake's most underwhelming efforts to date. Now, Drake seems to be distancing himself from the project entirely. He's no longer promoting it, and by his own admission, it's one of the worst albums he's released. That kind of backpedaling is telling, especially coming from someone whose ego has long been tied to his success metrics. Before we go further, be sure to like and subscribe. This isn't something Drake fans want to hear, but it's important to understand the reality. Drake isn't even standing by the album his fanbase is still defending. That says a lot. With SSS for You, Drake finds himself stuck in a music landscape where his third-week numbers are being crushed by a months-old Kendrick project. And there are no more excuses. We're well past the Super Bowl, so Drake can't point to a promotional boost for Kendrick. At this point, the music is speaking for itself. And Kendrick's music? It's winning. What we're witnessing is more than just one artist outperforming another. Kendrick Lamar is redefining the genre. He's proving that quality and cohesion still matter. GNX isn't just delivering hit singles. It's an entire album that listeners are returning to, track by track. Even deep cuts are breaking streaming records. That level of longevity, driven purely by artistic integrity, is rare, especially today. Meanwhile, artists like Drake are throwing everything at the wall: features, gimmicks, deluxe versions, trying to stay afloat. And yet, Kendrick's 12-track surprise album is climbing back to #1, long after release. That's not luck. That's impact. Kendrick is pushing hip-hop forward not just by making hits, but by showing what true staying power looks like. In an industry obsessed with the next big thing, GNX is reminding us what timeless music feels like. And right now, Drake simply can't compete with that. With Kendrick Lamar's GNX continuing to dominate, Drake has clearly been in shambles. The album's ongoing success, still outperforming SSS for You week after week, has pushed Drake into a spiral. Instead of facing the music and reflecting on his own missteps, he spent the week lashing out through his plot twist page, desperately trying to undermine Kendrick and the GNX album in whatever ways he can. It's gotten to the point where Drake's actions are coming off as more laughable than anything. One post in particular stood out: a video from Club Area 29, a spot Drake frequently references in his music. In the clip, a dancer, one he possibly name-dropped on the track, Give Me a Hug, is seen holding a dictionary. This was a direct callback to a line from that song where Drake mocks Kendrick's lyrical complexity, implying that fans need dictionaries to understand it and that it takes the fun out of rap. But this attempt to clown Kendrick has backfired in a big way. Rather than making listeners second-guess their love for GNX, Drake only highlighted how people are fully embracing the album's depth. Kendrick's music has managed to blend substance and entertainment, and fans are more than willing to pull out the dictionary if it means getting quality rap. Meanwhile, GNX's 15-week-old tracks are still charting higher than the 21 brand-new songs on SSS for You. Drake didn't stop there. He posted another clip of a fan choosing Kendrick's side, referencing his quirky peekaboo ad-libs and lines like, boom, bop, bam, the very things Drake tried to ridicule. The fan pointed out that while Kendrick's music might come with complex lyricism, it's still fun and engaging. The crowd is connecting with it, deep cuts, playful lines, and all. And that's what Drake seems to be missing. Instead of appreciating the artistry and the culture that's celebrating GNX, Drake continues to mock and nitpick. But none of it is landing. His attempts to frame Kendrick's work as boring or overly intellectual have failed to resonate. Fans are still locked into GNX, front to back. All of this has forced Drake into unfamiliar territory. He's no longer the numbers guy. For so long, Drake sat atop the industry, dismissing critics and challengers from a position of untouchable success. But now, he's been outshined, clearly, publicly, and repeatedly. And instead of humbling himself, he's doing what he always does, deflecting, distracting, and avoiding the truth. But it's not working. The narrative has shifted. Kendrick's artistry and cultural weight are speaking louder than Drake's antics. And for the first time in a long time, Drake can't control the story. As he scrambles to hold on to an image that no longer reflects reality, fans and the industry alike are watching Kendrick reshape what success and longevity look like in modern hip-hop. Drake can post, joke, and mock all he wants, but GNX continues to rise, and SSS for You continues to fall. At this point, it's clear Drake is finally starting to accept the failure of SSS for You, but instead of owning up to it directly, he's making excuses. He's trying to reframe the narrative, saying the album was suppressed, didn't get enough support, or wasn't pushed properly. But the truth is, all of these claims feel more like attempts to explain away the low numbers than anything rooted in reality. Drake did everything he could to set this album up for success, but he also quietly laid the groundwork to distance himself from it in case it flopped, which, as we now know, it did. And now, that's exactly what he's doing. The album is already being pushed aside, treated like a side project rather than a main entry in his catalog. Even Drake seems to realize the material was uninspired, filled with lazy writing and filler content, especially when compared to his previous work, even his more recent projects. This move seems purely strategic. Drake is trying to save face, to protect his brand and reputation by acting like the failure of SSS for You isn't as serious as it looks. But the signs were there from the beginning. The branding, the rollout, the collaborations, it all felt like a setup to give himself an easy out if things didn't go well. First, the album was framed as a collaborative project with PartyNextDoor, an artist far smaller than Drake in terms of commercial reach. Historically, Drake only collaborates with artists he can gain something from, whether it's popularity, cultural influence, or musical credibility. But here, it seems like he chose someone whose numbers were already low, giving him an excuse baked into the project if it underperformed. Then there's the genre label. Although the album sounds similar to Drake's usual style and contains plenty of rapping, it was categorized as R&B instead of hip-hop. That subtle shift helped position it outside of the rap space, which is far more competitive and scrutinized. Again, this feels intentional, giving the album an asterisk, something to help fans rationalize its lackluster reception. All these moves were clearly designed to allow Drake to back away if the album didn't land, and now that it hasn't, that's exactly what he's doing. He's already begun erasing it from the conversation. There are no major music videos, no extended rollout, no continued promo. In fact, Drake has gone unusually quiet for someone who just dropped a new project. We've never seen him disappear from the spotlight like this after an album release. It speaks volumes. Drake, who used to thrive off being on top, off the numbers, the hype, the constant wins, is now facing a new reality. The numbers aren't there, the excitement isn't there, and for once, the usual formula isn't working. And rather than confront that head-on, Drake is doing what he can to pretend like this chapter doesn't exist. But in doing so, he's admitting something he's never had to face before. The throne might not be his anymore, and he can't spin. Drake's recent silence speaks volumes. After years of dominating charts and being obsessed with numbers, the failure of SSS for You has clearly taken a toll. For an artist who built his identity around chart performance and commercial dominance, losing the #1 spot to Kendrick Lamar's GNX, an album that's been out for weeks, was more than a disappointment. It was a breaking point. This loss seems to have completely discouraged Drake. Instead of bouncing back, he's stepped away from everything. And for someone so focused on staying at the top, this sudden disappearance shows just how much this album's failure hurt. SSS for You didn't just underperform, it exposed a deeper issue. Drake's formula is stale, his energy is gone, and his creativity seems tapped out. There's no spark left in the music, and now, there's not even the numbers to justify it. What's worse is that Drake isn't even pretending to stand by the album. He's slowly pushing it into the background, hoping fans forget it ever happened. Any potential comeback plans have been delayed, likely until the dust settles and SSS for You fades from memory. It's clear he wants to reset the narrative and rebrand entirely. Looking back at his catalog, it's hard to imagine any future Drake project being remembered well if this is the path he's on. He's put his career in a strange and fragile place. SSS for You wasn't just another mediocre project, it was a complete shift from what he used to represent, and not in a good way. Even Drake himself seems to recognize that. The issue isn't that the music is drastically worse than his past work. It's that the reception was brutal, and being overshadowed by Kendrick has left him without the one thing he relied on: dominance. Despite having every advantage, a surprise drop, a fresh body of work, a loyal fanbase, Drake still lost. And now, he's treating the album like a mistake rather than a misstep. That tells us a lot about the current state of hip-hop. Kendrick's quiet, quality-first approach has proven more powerful than Drake's calculated, numbers-driven strategy. In fact, this moment might be an even bigger win for Kendrick than the beef itself. The impact of GNX is lasting, and Drake's complete retreat proves how effective it was. Drake's failure isn't just a one-time flop, it's a reflection of a larger shift in the culture. And with his usual strategies no longer working, Drake is left without the tools to operate in this new era. So what does this mean for hip-hop? Honestly, it might be in the best place it's been in years. Kendrick's authenticity, artistry, and lasting impact are winning, not marketing gimmicks or streaming tricks. Drake tried to rig the game, but as Kendrick once said, "You can't fake influence." And now that SSS for You is fading fast, Drake's learning that the hard way. What do you think this moment says about Kendrick's power and Drake's future in the industry? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts.